Hi, I'm Jesse Mallory. I'm the State Director at Americans for Prosperity Colorado, here to talk to you today about our efforts to stop the spending spree in Washington and end the wasteful spending that we're seeing. We're talking with state and federal leaders who are on the front line of these fiscal battles. And today, our special guest is Representative Janice Rich from Colorado's 55th House District out on the Western Slope. Representative Rich serves on Finance and the Appropriations Committee, so she has in-depth knowledge about government spending. Representative, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So what concerns you the most as you see Washington spend trillions of dollars in legislation any given week?
Well, and this has been going on for a long time, but I don't really see it as a true investment in our future. And with what they are proposing right now, that's going to be a tax hike like we've never seen before. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a tax hike on small businesses and workers. I don't care what they say that, oh no, that's not going to happen. It is going to happen. And it's very scary. And I'm very concerned about that. I wish someone had the political will to stop and look at what they're doing to us.
Yeah. But, these proposals promise all sorts of great things for state and local governments, they say. But what kind of strings are attached when you take money from Washington?
Well, you can call them strings. I call them bribes because, but you're right. I mean, they're not going to give local governments or state governments anything without something attached to it, without a requirement. Let me give you an example. Once in one of these bills, it's going to shut out non-union workers. So, and it's going to enforce employers to hand over information on their employees to the unions. This is going to drive up the costs of infrastructure projects. It is going to hurt independent contractors. So these strings that are attached, the states and the local governments are going to be required to do that. And so a lot of people are going to lose their jobs over this. It might sound good, but a lot of people are going to lose their jobs.
So what things are you hearing from your constituents who are seeing what's going on? They're frustrated. What are they relaying to you about their concerns?
The lack of trust in Washington, never doing what they say they'll go there to do. The addiction to spending that they have. They're concerned about their children's future and what that's going to look like. Those are the type of things that I'm hearing.
So Washington is trillions in debt. What prevents Colorado's legislature from spending like that?
Oh, Colorado has the best thing in place in our Constitution, and it is called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It really disciplines this state to not overspend. I wish other states, we should be the model to follow, but it really reins in our spending. Now, I think that the state spends too much money as it is, but it does rein in that spending. And it's in the Constitution, and we must always, that is our first and foremost duty as a state legislator, is to balance our budget every single year.
Doesn't Colorado have a balanced budget amendment?
Yes, it's Tabor. We have to balance the budget.
So in Colorado, for those of you who aren't aware, that if the government wants to raise taxes or issue more debt, and that's important. I think that's one of the most important pieces of Tabor is that the government just can't issue debt as it sees fit. It has to go to the voters. It has to get their buy-in. It has to get their permission. Mm-hmm. And imagine if Washington had to come back and say, hey, we want to increase the debt ceiling. We want to do these things. I can't imagine how the average voter would react to that. And that's one of the strengths of our Taxpayers Bill of Rights is that it puts the citizens and the legislators on equal footing when it comes to fiscal issues, which is why there's so many special interests and politicians who want to spend more, tax more, increase the debt, who just are adamantly against the Taxpayers Bill of Rights. And it's one of the reasons why we support it so much. So
right. And we see this every year, Jesse, when there are people on the other side of the aisle that try to make it sound like, oh, this will really help out Colorado if we eliminate Tabor. But, we can see by what's going on in California, we can see by what's going on even in our federal government, that we do that, we will be lost forever and we will be eternally in debt.
So I remember not too long ago, the state legislature passing a massive spending bill that they called infrastructure.
Oh.
And America's Prosperity Colorado, we certainly had a few things to say about what they were doing. Can you walk everybody through what this was, and more importantly, what it wasn't?
I debated, all of us debated this bill long and hard. And it's interesting that they will title a bill that sounds really good. And who wouldn't support sustainability of the transportation system? That is the name of the bill. Mm-hmm. Who wouldn't support that? But then you get into the weeds of it. And it increases spending for the state transportation system through the general fund. And it creates new fees. Now in November, on the Colorado ballot, even if you were going to have a fee, you needed to take that to the vote of the people. But you get a slick attorney in there that can get around that. And they created 4 enterprises that do the exact same thing. So they can funnel money through those enterprises without going to the taxpayers. I could go on and on about this. You might want to ask me some specific things, but they are going to fee us to death. Yeah. And now let me tell you what else is important. This one I'm very passionate about is that a lot of this doesn't go into place until January of 2023. Now, why is that? Because there's an election in November.
I think there's something going on in 2022 that some folks
something like that, something called an election. But very little of this sustainability of the transportation system is actually going to go to roads and bridges.
Well, and that's what I want to dig into is that recently I saw a news story that there's a new climate requirement when building new roads, and all this comes after the legislature went to great lengths to talk about how they want to get people out of traffic, they want to build roads, but it sounds to me that they're going to have a real hard time doing that.
I think they're going to have a terrible time doing that, and you're right, that is part of the bill. There is an electric vehicle road usage equalization fee, but they are also they want, if they could get their way, but there's been a little bit of pushback on this, for people to, I don't know, I guess you have to put something in your car so you know how many miles you're driving. Now, how does that work for those of us like myself that live on the Western Slope that have to drive 250 miles just one way to get to Denver?
Yeah, and that's and it's shocking that Denver would overlook other parts of the state when they're making some of these decisions. I'm shocked with that. I'm sure you are too. But
there's always going to be that urban-rural divide.
Yeah, exactly. And when I look at what's going on in Washington, I look at what's going on in Colorado, I see a lot of similarities. And now they talk about these small pieces of these bills that here's what we want to do with this bill, but they leave out the fact that even in the federal infrastructure bills, that there's all these subsidies for electric vehicles, and we all know that electric vehicles are largely driven by wealthier populations in the suburban areas, and that the people paying for this are the low-income communities in the urban centers, and that it's something that we see both in Washington, we see it here in Denver, and I think it's something that people need to be aware of, that low-income communities are going to subsidize wealthier communities through these EV tax credits and these charging stations and all these other things, all things that mysteriously were left out of the debate from the proponents, who, be they in Washington, be they in Denver, who are trying to advance these sort of things. Why do you think that's happening?
Oh, I think they kind of hope that you don't notice. That is part of the welfare for wealthy people that I think that they've thrown in there. But a $7.5 billion in subsidies for electric vehicles. And just so you know, I don't believe for a minute that our electric grid can support that. I don't.
There's certainly a lot of questions on that.
Look at the rolling blackouts that they're having now in California. Look at the rolling blackouts. They even had a few of those in Texas. And if the entire nation does something like that, we're going to go backwards. I don't know how far, and it's concerning to me because they haven't thought that through.
Yeah, well, and another piece of this too is that recently the Colorado government was trying to pass through rulemaking, not through the legislature, through rulemaking, the employee trip reduction plan that said it was to create incentives, which, I have big concerns when the government wants to create incentives because they rarely work out that way, to get people out of their vehicles. And in Colorado, we know that, the vast majority of people are taking their vehicles to get to work, get their kids to school, and go about their lives. But this effort was to try to get you to say, hey, we're going to limit parking. We want to, push people towards taking public transportation and other things, which sounds great. But the day-to-day impact that has, like on a single working mother, how can she do that? And why is the state feeling that like they need to intervene in this area? Do you have any insights there?
Well, I think the state right now, in the makeup of our state right now, they feel like they know what's best for everyone. But it's interesting to me when I talk to various legislators that they've never even been to the Western Slope. The most that they know about where I'm from, Grand Junction, is that they see the exit sign when they're driving to Utah.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that? I hear it. I hear that's Vail. I hear that a lot. Is that true?
Yeah. Really, I think a lot of them thought Colorado ended at Vail, but I can tell you that I appreciate, I guess, what they're trying to do. But if I can get to Denver in 4 hours in my car, rather than on a bus that will take 8 to 12 hours, I'm taking my car.
Yeah.
And so maybe the type of transportation they're talking about might work in a metropolitan area, but it's not going to work in a rural area. It's not going to work in southern Colorado. It's not going to work in western Colorado. So they always try to work out these one size fits all, and they don't take into consideration how it's going to hurt other people in the state.
It's a real problem. And I mean, from Washington to Denver, we're certainly seeing a lot of trends here. And that's why at America's Prosperity, we've been advocating against deficit spending and ending Washington waste for some time now. And over 1 million letters have gone into federal offices. We've had hundreds of meetings across the country to bring awareness to this issue. If you want to make your voice heard, join us at stopthespendingspree.com and reach out to your federal office. So, Representative, thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership. I know it's tough. There's a lot going on from federal to state, but I appreciate you and others who are in there with the fight, who are standing up for Colorado taxpayers. Is there any final words you want to leave us with?
Well, I just want you to know that the fight is worth it. The fight is absolutely worth it. I have lived in Colorado almost 50 years. I love this state, and I don't want it to turn into California. I want us to have a great state, and we can if there's some political will.
Very true. So, all right, again, visit stopthespendingspree.com. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.